What's up guys, and welcome back to another Pokémon Sun and Moon video, and today we are going to be talking about the champion of the Alola region, or whoever might be the final boss of the main game. Now of course we have champions from all the different regions. We have Lance, we have Blue, we have Cynthia, we have Steven, Wallace, Alda, Iris and Diantha, all the champions of the different regions. But before we get into the actual video and to talk about who might be the champion and talk about the possibilities we've seen so far and what other things we might be saying in the future, I suppose, we need to talk about Black 2 and Black 2 and White 2. Because in both of those games, the champion was not the end boss of the, well, I guess maybe in Black 2 and White 2, Iris was, but Alda was not the boss of the end of the main game, because Geetsis was. Geetsis was with the Reshiram and Zekrom and stuff. He was sort of the main end game boss, or the plot boss, and then when that ended, you could then move on, because obviously beforehand you beat each of the Elite Four, and then the whole ends castle things happened, and obviously it takes over, and then you have to battle Geetsis, and then that's it. You have to go back and do the Elite Four again in the future. So that's sort of where the main game ends, and it's part of the after game to do the champion. In my opinion, that's how I see it, at least. So talking about the champion as such doesn't necessarily mean the sort of the strongest person in the region maybe, but how the main plot ends. And of course, remember, we haven't got gyms like we used to. Obviously Alola is the first region not to have gyms in it. Instead we have the Island Trials and the Kahunas as opposed to gym leaders and possibly the Elite Four. We don't quite know, but so we don't really know. In that case, we don't know, will there still be a champion? We assume not, I suppose, since there's no gyms, hence there's no Pokemon League in the region. So I'm going to assume, for the purpose of this video, of course, when I say champion, I mean the end game boss of the main plot game. So that could be anyone really. It could be, obviously there will be a similar setup, obviously, because gyms have been replaced by Island Trials and gym leaders have been replaced by the trial captains and such. We can assume the champion will be replaced with something equally similar, so either instead of having the Elite Four challenge and the champion, maybe there is a whole takeover by Team Skull, for example. You have to beat all of them, and you have to work your way up, and then that's sort of the end there, or possibly there's something else. But that's what we were talking about in this video. So when I say champion, I mean sort of the last battle of the main game. So first up, let's talk about who we're counting out. These are people, that we've already received sort of titles for that couldn't be any higher. So, for example, the trial captains and the Kahunas of each island, or the Kahuna, we only have one of them so far. We're assuming that those can't be the champions, because obviously the trial captains couldn't be, because it's like a gym leader turning to be a champion, which I suppose could happen, but you guys get what I mean. The Kahunas, obviously, there are 4 of them on per island, so if anything, they're going to be like the Elite Four, so again, they couldn't really be a champion. So we're counting these out. However, we're not counting out other characters who have had terms, because these guys have they have sort of levels and titles in the sort of the order, the hierarchy of the Alola League, as I'm going to call it, i.e. trial captains, Kahunas, and possibly something, someone that overarches all 4 of the Kahunas, who knows. So that's who we're counting out. Who are we counting in? Well, I've selected 6 characters, 5 characters rather, we have seen so far in sort of the trailers and such, that have, in my opinion, a possibility of being the champion, either because of previous games, how they've worked with the champions, and just, thoughts, I suppose. First of these is going to be Hau, our rival, because of course the rival has been a champion in the previous game. For example, looking all the way back to Red and Blue, we had, of course, Blue, our rival, ends up being the champion before us, and we have to defeat him. Is this possible? In my opinion, it's possible, but I don't see it happening. Hau is not the sort of guy who's going to be the final boss, because he seems like one of those other rivals we had in that X and Y, where it's like, Pokemon are my friends, I'm going to train and battle them, but it's not serious. So he won't be he might be fairly strong, similar to Barry and Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, but he will not be the overarching sort of the final boss, for example. It just wouldn't happen. It wouldn't make any sense. So I'm counting him out, but he's still a possibility in my opinion. I suppose he could make it happen because of previous games, but I can't see it because of his character. Next up we have Professor Kukui. Yes, we've never had a professor be the champion before, because professors obviously spend a lot of their time being the professor, so they don't have time to be the champion. But Professor Kukui, because there is no league as such in the Alola region, we could see the final boss being maybe just Professor Kukui. Maybe we do some stuff, and then he's like, I'm going to challenge you to a battle to see if you're worthy of title of the leader of the Alola region. Who knows? So he might do something like that. And remember, his specialty for Pokemon research is Pokemon moves, which is why I'm leaning, why I'm even offering him up as a possibility, because he researches moves. So possibly that could then transition into being a good battler, and we could see him use that. And obviously he might have the 3 final evolutions of the starters sort of thing. Obviously something along those lines. Final evolution of Rockruff. It could be an interesting way to do it, similar to how there was a boss battle for Professor Oak in the original games that was never used. Obviously that was still like a final boss after even the champion and such, so Professor Cuckoo possibly could have little battles to do along the way, similar to Professor Sycamore. Will he be the final champion? I don't think so, because again he's the professor, but I'm still offering it up as a possibility. Next up we have Guzma, obviously the leader of Team Skull. Now if they go a similar path of Pokemon Black and White, where obviously maybe Team Skull take over a couple of towns or a couple of cities in the Alola region, you have to fight your way through the town and such, and get your way and defeat Team Skull just there and then, instead of, because obviously there's no final Pokemon League challenge, so maybe they take over the island trial sites and something goes wrong. Who knows, and you have to battle them up. Maybe they capture all the Guardians, for example, something like that, and end up holding them at gunpoint. Who knows? Obviously not gunpoint, but you get the idea. So maybe you have to do that. So he could possibly be written as the end game. I can't see that happening now. Yes, okay, Geetsis was the one in Pokemon Black and White, but Guzma is he just seems too cheesy in my opinion. Yes, okay, I know Team Skull are based off of like ruffians and thugs and such. I guess he sort of fits that idea, but he just looks too much like I think it's Morty from Rick and Morty. So I just can't see him being the champion. It wouldn't be compelling enough to be the champion. Because for one, I can't see him being too strong a trainer, and two, he's got no essence behind him, similar to how Lance has. Lance is just the dragon trainer, so I can't see it happening again. But we move on to another one, which I feel like has a decent chance, of more than what we've seen so far, of being the champion, and that is Gladion being a final boss battle. Gladion is again a member of Team Skull, but he is not really in Team Skull. He seems like he's just joining them to ally himself with someone. It seems like he could just, after Team Skull falls, carry on being a menace in the Alola region. And of course he seems like he's going to be a rival, because we've seen in his battle intro there's an extra sort of flash and extra animation, so it seems like he's going to be a bit more than just a Team Skull admin, for example. He might end up being a proper rival for you across the game. So that's why I feel like he could be the champion or the final boss battle. So maybe Team Skull, goes and fades away, but then Gladion comes back and turns, maybe resurges Team Skull in some way. Who knows? So maybe when she defeats Guzma once, he in the middle of the game, for example, he just relents Team Skull and they fall back, but then Gladion resurges them and something like that. I don't know. I could see Gladion being a champion or being a final boss a bit more than I could see the 3 we've seen so far. But then we move on to a more interesting one, and this is someone I've seen someone comment this on basically every single video of my Sun and Moon videos since the reveal. So you're finally getting, I can't remember the name of the user at the moment, I'm afraid, but you're finally getting your wish. And of course we have Lusamine here. Lusamine as a champion. Well, we've had female champions for quite a good run now. Of course we had Diantha last generation, Iris in Black 2 and White 2, Cynthia in Generation 4, so a good few female champions, so there's no reason for that to stop anytime soon. But why would Lusamine be a champion? Well, it seems like Team Skull, a Foundation might end up turning out to be some pretty shady people, pretty shady folks. So if indeed that is the case, we could easily see Lusamine becoming a final boss of sorts, and sort of way to finish off the main game by defeating the Foundation. And of course, only makes sense for her to be the strongest if she is the president of the Foundation. Now, this doesn't look like a particularly strong trainer off the bat, but she could certainly have some secrets behind her. She seems like a shady character, so I could definitely see it happening. So Lusamine and Gladion are my 2 highest sort of bets for the champion or the final boss at the moment. But really, I think I haven't seen it yet. I don't think we've seen the final boss. Yes, okay, a Foundation could be menacing, could be evil in some way, but I don't think that's the final boss. Even if the Foundation turn out to be the end game, we have to defeat them to win. I don't think Lusamine is the woman to be the champion. I think there'll be another figure in the background of the Foundation being very shady, conducting all of these underground experiments, and we won't find out who's pulling all the strings until right at the end of the game. And I feel like that'd be really interesting. But of course there is one other option for a champion battle or a final boss battle we still need to talk about, and that is the possibility that the final battle or the end battle of the main plot might not be a human. might not actually have to be a proper normal Pokemon battle, and it could be an Ultra Beast battle. We have Ultra Beast 1, a UBO 1, UBO 2, and UBO 2 so far, and we can only assume the number is going to keep going up, so maybe UBO 10, or UB10 rather, will be the final boss of the game. Perhaps, depending on how the Ultra Beasts work, of course, it could be different ways. It might be the most powerful Ultra Beast, it could be the combined forces of all the Ultra Beasts together, or it could be an Ultra Beast team itself. So instead of having a Pokemon trainer with 6 Pokemon, it could be an Ultra Beast, or 6 Ultra Beasts all lining up together, and you have to defeat them all at once, which could be quite interesting. I didn't know how they would twist it if they were going to that, but I feel like it's a real possibility that the final main plot boss for this game, for Sun and Moon, could possibly, instead of being, because we've removed the champion basically, the champion is no longer a factor, because of course we have no gyms and no Pokemon League. So they could easily just say, we're not going to have an equivalent for the champion, we're going to make it a proper sort of game where you battle a boss at the end, because obviously Pokemon games, they follow the same formula all the way along. Gyms, Pokemon League, Elite Four, champion. Whereas if you look at other RPG games, generally there is a malevolent force, I think, or malicious force, arises wherever. For example, Zelda, let's take a hit on that. Obviously Ganon or Ganondorf arises in the region somewhere. Okay, it's the same region for all the Zelda games, but I'm using it as an example. So for Zelda, you have to go through and you have to get the temples, and then you end up with the RPG, and at the end you actually battle against this force and you defeat it. So instead of it being just a trainer you battle against, you could have a force you defeat, and it would be a bit more roleplay, I suppose. But that's just what I think. So let me know what you think down below. Do you think it would be a player, a character? And who do you think it would be if that's the case? Or do you think the Ultra Beasts might actually turn out to be the final foe of these games? Let me know what you think down below, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button. But for now, this will be it for me for today. I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.